Today we're going to be driving this thing, the Audi SQ7. Now the Q7, the base car, is one of the best 7-seater premium SUVs that you can buy. But someone at Audi thought it'd be really funny to go and lump in a 500 brake horsepower V8 engine. The only issue though is that, well, the SQ7 is ginormous and it's also very heavy. So what I want to know is, does it work well as a good performance SUV? We're going to find out. But before I get into the review, why not leave a like and also subscribe, because we've got loads more awesome videos just like this. An SQ7, apart from Q7, is to compare it with the entry-level Q7 Sport, because when you go for the level above that, the Q7 S-Line, it looks pretty much exactly the same as the SQ7, although there are some subtle differences which I'll get onto in a minute. Anyway, between this and the base Q7, the difference is really kind of around here at the front of the car. The Q7 has this kind of fin that runs around the side of this slightly larger brake duct. Now, on the standard SQ7, that's actually silver, but on this car, this is the range-topping Vorsprung model, so we get it in gloss black instead. And the same goes for the grille. The surround here is gloss black. If you go for a regular SQ7, that's in silver. Other differences, you also have body-coloured trim at the bottom of the car, whereas on the standard version, that's in plastic. Moving further around, on the Vorsprung model, we get 22-inch alloy wheels as standard. On the base SQ7, it's 21 inches. I think they look absolutely fantastic. Give the car a really premium and luxurious look. On the standard Q7, you'll have plastic down here. It's body coloured here on the SQ7. And we've got black trim along here. Again, on the standard version, that's in silver. Now, the other differences are a slightly more sculpted rear wing, so it kind of juts in the centre here, whereas on the standard car, it's just one smooth piece. And of course, we get a quad exhaust system, and it's real. On so many cars these days, quad exhaust systems are fake, but on the SQ7, they are completely real. And that's also a way of telling this car apart from the S-Line. The S-Line has a twin exhaust system that are kind of really neatly integrated into the rear bumper. These are a good old-fashioned quad exhaust system, so if you're following an SQ7, you're not going to get it mixed up with the cheaper model. The other difference, of course, is price. So the standard SQ7 comes in at £76,000, making it around 20 grand more than the very entry-level Q7 Sport. And if you want to compare it with the S-Line, the difference comes in at around £17,000. Of course, if you fancy splashing out a bit, you could go for the black edition, which is 80 grand, which adds some black gloss highlights here and there. And the one that we're in at the moment is the Vorsprung edition, which means you get those flashy 22-inch wheels. You also get matrix LED headlights and also a Bang & Olufsen sound system. All models, though, are really well equipped, so there's no real need to go for the highest of higher range cars. We get this lovely big infotainment system in the center console, and it is one of the very best that's out there, because not only is it very slick and fluid, it's intuitive to use, and best of all, it comes with haptic feedback. So when you press a button, you get a slight vibration under your finger that kind of confirms that you've pressed something. And of course, you can hook it up with Android Auto or Apple CarPlay if you just want to bypass all of that. Now, what's cool about the Q7, and it's the same in the SQ7 obviously, is that we have a second panel down here as well, all for the climate controls. Now, these can tend to be a bit fiddly on cheaper cars that try and incorporate this, but because you have a dedicated screen for it, again with haptic feedback and nice big buttons, it's actually really easy to access all of the climate settings that you're after. So I don't have too much of a problem with it, and it's nice and clear and responsive as well. We've also got a shortcut button down here for the different driving modes, which range from off-road, if you're brave enough to take this off-road. There's also an efficiency mode as well to try and eke out a bit more fuel from that V8. You're not going to get much more from it. Auto, which will change up the settings depending on the way that you're driving. There's dynamic, the sportiest mode available, And there's also an individual mode, which is really cool. So that means if you wanted, let's say, the engine response to be a little bit faster, but you wanted to slacken off suspension a bit, you can do so through the individual mode. Other little things I wanted to point out are these beautiful sports seats. They've got the S badge on them, and in here they're perforated and quilted, and they feel absolutely stunning. So comfortable to sit in. And we also have an S wheel. It gets a bit interesting here because if you go for the standard SQ7, you get a flat bottom steering wheel, but on the Vorsprung, you get a round wheel. And it is a lovely wheel because it's contoured around the side here, and it's just got a really nice, thin, sporty grip. This is one of the best wheels on the market, and you also get physical buttons on it too if you're not really into the whole haptic feedback that the VW group has got going on at the moment. And speaking of best in the business, the Audi Virtual Cockpit, they were one of the first to do it, and they're still one of the best. Ultra clear, customizable, nice and colourful as well. It just means that you feel like you're in a really nice high-tech car. Now, in any normal car, this would be the back seats, but because we're in a 7-seater, this is the middle row. Now, we'll get onto the rear seats in just a minute, but I thought while we're here, we'll move the seats as far back as possible to see how much leg and headroom we can get. And I'm just under 6 foot, there's loads to go. I could be 8 foot tall and I'd still fit in here absolutely fine. Same for headroom, even with the panoramic roof, there's still absolutely loads still to go. And the cool thing is as well, is that if you're on a long journey and want to have a nap, you can recline the seat far back as well, which is very nice. And speaking of nice, these seats are the same quality as the ones you get in the front. There's usually a bit of disparity between front and rear seats. I know it sounds really nerdy, but when you drive cars all the time, you notice it. But we've still got the same perforated and quilted leather back here as we do in the front. And even the person sat in the middle has got it pretty nice too. Speaking of the middle, we have an armrest, if no one sat there, with a cup holder. It's pretty basic, but doesn't need to be anything flashy. And in terms of connectivity, we've got a couple of USB-C ports, a 12-volt charger too. We've also got this really cool panel back here as well, where we can control the climate settings, and it's all done digitally. It just feels so futuristic. The great thing about the SQ7 is it's just as practical as it is sporty. So in the back here, we've got 705 litres of storage, which is just massive. But even with the rearmost seats in place, bear in mind this is a 7-seater, you still have 295 litres to play with, which is kind of super mini territory. Really impressive. But it doesn't end there. We have a small control panel at the side here to control various parts of the car's practical features. So, for instance, if we wanted to let an old dog jump in, we can actually lower the suspension, which is really handy. We've also got the optional electric tow hook on here as well, so by pressing this button, the tow hook will pop out. But the really handy feature is you don't have to lean in to pull the rear seats up. You simply have to hold down these two buttons and they go up electronically. Now you do need to slide the front bench forward as well to give those people in the back a bit of rear space, but if I just pull on these two here, you're then sorted. 7 seats, just like that. Now I've got the seats in their most forward position and I've still got loads of leg room, but that means that we can get into the back. And to do so, you just pull on this little handle here, and then we've got another handle here that we've got to push down and pull back, and it is assisted, and then we've just got to jump in. And even with these seats here, I've still got a little bit of legroom, and headroom's not too bad. And to top it all off, I've even got a little cup holder. Now, admittedly, this isn't the first time I've driven the SQ7. I drove it when it first came out a couple of years ago, and at that point it was only available with a diesel engine. And it was a great engine. The only problem is that no one's buying diesels anymore, so Audi decided to get rid of it and instead replace it with this thing. It's a 4-litre V8 producing 500 brake horsepower and 770 Newton meters of torque. Now that is hypercar levels of torque. It's all sent to all 4 wheels through an 8-speed Tiptronic gearbox, and it'll go from 0 to 62 miles per hour in 4.1 seconds. In a car weighing 2.3 tonnes. So the downside though of going for the petrol motor is MPG. It gets knocked back to the low 20s on a combined cycle, whereas on the diesel, you were looking more in the 40s. The benefit though is, it sounds brilliant. On the road in the SQ7, and we're going to start things off by seeing how well it performs as just a regular Q7. So I've got an efficiency mode at the moment. It feels very much like a regular Q7 with a bit more punch. We've also got an all-road and off-road setting to optimize traction in different scenarios. Unfortunately though, I don't have any situation of where I can take this car off-road at the moment. I'm not sure Audi would be all that happy if I went green laning in it. We'll just have to take their word for it at the moment that it works. It's an all-wheel drive car, so it will have some off-road capability, but if you're going to be off-roading every day and you want a bit of punch, probably best to go for a V8 Land Rover Defender. Right, I'm a bit bored of being sensible now, so I'll put it in dynamic and... I love the sound of a bit of V8 in the morning. What a noise! Who would have thought? This has really surprised me with the SQ7, because it's not an RS model, it's that kind of middle ground of being a performance car without being properly hardcore. But the V8 in this sounds fantastic. There's got to be an element of it being pumped into the cabin a little bit, but while a lot of these augmented sounds really don't sound very realistic at all, this thing sounds just like the natural motor, but just a bit louder. Now there is a downside to having a glorious 8-cylinder engine in front of you, and that is the MPG. So while I've been doing some hooning about for filming purposes today, on my drive up here this morning it was pretty much all motorway mileage, so that's where you'd expect to get your best MPG. And I was averaging around 22, 23 MPG, which really isn't great. Yes, it's a V8, yes, it's a big car, but I still don't think that's particularly good. And it's a bit of a shame, because when I first drove this car a few years ago, it was the diesel version. And of course they've got rid of the diesel now, but in the diesel you could expect around 40 MPG. It was much better, and it still sounded really good. And so I think it's a bit of a shame now that the diesel isn't available. Yes, this V8 sounds really good, and it's got a great punch to it, but this is also going to be an everyday car. You're probably going to be using it for some family duties as well. It would be better if it had better mileage. But if you can spend 76 grand on a car, or in this case 98 for the Vorsprung, I assume fuel bills won't be that much of a problem for you, and it is a big tank, so it'll be an expensive fill-up, and one that will probably be relatively frequent, but that's the price you pay, along with the price of the car, to have a family SUV that sounds like a muscle car. Now on the motorway I can whack it in efficiency mode, which will try and prioritise fuel economy, and go to automatic gears, and I can also use some of the driver assistance features that we've got in here. So we have a adaptive cruise control that also kind of works in conjunction with a lane keep assistance, so that you can have some form of semi-autonomous driving. It means if I activate the cruise now at 70, it'll keep me in my lane, monitor the traffic in front, and adjust my speed if they begin to slow down or speed up. It'll also know that you're approaching a roundabout, which I'm doing now, and it's actually slowing the car down, which is really cool. It'll also do it quite far away actually, which can be a bit of a pain, because you'll think you're really far away from a roundabout and it'll start slowing down. But it's a pretty nifty feature to have if you're daydreaming, which you shouldn't be doing while driving. It really is a good all-round car, this. It doesn't feel like it's got two ultra distinct characters, of where one is ultra lazy and the other one is really sporty. The sporty side does lack the aggression of a full-out RS model, but I don't think it needs to be that more aggressive than it is. When you're buying a Q7 or even an SQ7, it's going to have to cover lots of different tasks. taking the kids to school, picking up family members or picking up friends, covering lots of miles on a journey to a family holiday. I do think this is one of the best performance SUVs on the market, particularly under £100,000. Its only real close rival there is the Porsche Cayenne. And I think that if you're looking at something that's better to drive and it's got better performance, you're looking at an Aston Martin DBX or Lamborghini Urus, and they are significantly more expensive. So if you're wanting to scare your children on their trip to school with sheer speed and V8 shoutiness, get an SQ7.